no hairspray holds better than Aquanet.
Its advanced front-loading system is just amazing.
Warning, once you get your hands on Rubiks Cube...
They told us the 80s were cool, but beneath the neon lights and big hair was a decade full of fashion crimes, awkward tech, and cultural moments we were too young to question. What if everything we thought was iconic was actually incredibly embarrassing? Shoulder pads were not just a trend in the 1980s. They were a full-on fashion declaration. Whether you were heading to the office or just stepping out for a casual lunch, those heavily padded shoulders were a non-negotiable part of your wardrobe. The idea was simple: project power, confidence, and structure. But what ended up happening was that people started walking around looking like linebackers at a business convention. It did not matter if you were a teenager or a top executive. You looked like you were ready to tackle someone. Some folks went as far as layering shoulder pads beneath everything, from t-shirts to blazers to sweaters. The silhouette was so exaggerated it became cartoonish. You can thank television shows like Dynasty for pushing this agenda hard. Every character was dressed like they were about to run a Fortune 500 company. That extreme boxy shape was supposed to say strength, but all it really screamed was fashion overkill. And the worst part? No one questioned it. We all just nodded and stuffed our sleeves. Looking back, it feels like a strange dream where everyone collectively decided to look 3 times wider than they actually were. What were we thinking? Neon spandex was the uniform of the 1980s workout craze. Bright pinks, electric blues, blinding greens, you name it, we wore it. And not just in the gym. These were outfits people wore to the grocery store, to school events, even just to hang out at the mall. Inspired by the queen of fitness herself, Jane Fonda, neon spandex became a statement of energy and enthusiasm. But it also became a serious fashion crime scene. It hugged every curve, and not in a flattering way. Leg warmers over tights, headbands across the forehead, sweatbands around the wrists, and leotards that looked like they had been electrocuted. It was like your body got into a fight with a highlighter and lost. The weird part is how seriously everyone took it. These were not ironic outfits. These were full-blown, committed looks. Matching sets were a big deal too. If your top did not match your leggings, you clearly did not understand how fitness worked. The worst offenders were the metallic finishes, like you were a space traveler on their way to jazzercise. Today, we hide photos of those outfits like state secrets. But back then, that was the peak of cool. Big hair was not just a choice, it was a lifestyle. The higher your bangs, the closer you were to pop culture heaven. And to get there, you needed one thing above all else: Aquanet. This hairspray was the unsung hero of every massive hairdo in the 1980s. People sprayed it like it was oxygen. You could walk into any school hallway and smell the fog of chemicals before you saw the people. This was hair that could withstand a hurricane. Teasing, crimping, backcombing, it was an art form. But let us not sugarcoat it. The result was often horrifying. Hair that looked like it had been electrocuted, standing stiff and unnatural, casting shadows in the hallway light. It took hours to build and about 5 days to wash out. There was nothing soft or touchable about it. You could lose a small pet in someone's hair and not find it for days. Some folks even carried travel-size Aquanet for emergency touch-ups. Imagine being so committed to a hairstyle that it could double as protective headgear. But here is the thing. We loved it. Every wild tendril and sky-high curl felt like rebellion, personality, and attitude, even if, in hindsight, we all looked like extras in a weather disaster movie. The mullet might be the most unintentionally hilarious haircut of all time. Think about it. Someone looked at themselves in the mirror and said, "You know what I need? 2 haircuts in one. Short and clean in the front, wild and flowing in the back. Business in the front, party in the back." The slogan was catchy, the reality was tragic. The mullet did not care who you were. Country singer, rock star, awkward teenager, you were fair game. This style swept across America like a questionable breeze and found a home on every head it touched. It became more than a haircut. It was a personality trait. a red flag waving in the wind of bad choices. Parents hated it, which made teenagers love it even more. Athletes, musicians, and television characters all proudly rocked mullets, giving it cultural legitimacy it absolutely did not deserve. The worst part? People maintained this look, trimmed the front, brushed the back. It took effort to look that confused. And somehow, this walking contradiction of a haircut became a national symbol. Looking back, it is the kind of thing you would expect to see in a parody film, not family photo albums. But there it is, living proof that even hair can have an identity crisis. Parachute pants were the loudest whisper of 1980s fashion. One swish, one rustle, and you knew someone was approaching. These shiny, baggy, synthetic monstrosities became a badge of honor for breakdancers, wannabe pop stars, and middle schoolers who thought they were all that. Made from nylon and often decked out with unnecessary zippers, they looked like someone tried to reinvent spacesuits for dance battles. And for a brief, shining moment, they were the coolest thing you could wear. But let us be real, no one could sit comfortably in them. You moved, they crinkled. You danced, they inflated. They were not breathable, not flattering, and definitely not subtle. The fashion industry tried to make them seem futuristic, but they ended up looking like rejected uniforms from a science fiction show. Everyone who wore them walked with a swagger that said, "Yes, I know these pants are ridiculous, and I love it." And you know what? That kind of confidence is admirable. But that does not mean the pants get a pass. They remain one of the strangest, noisiest, and most impractical choices we ever made, and we made them with pride. Being a Madonna wannabe was not just a phase, it was a full-on lifestyle. Lace gloves, giant bows, layers of necklaces, crucifix earrings, and fishnet stockings, all wrapped around a look that screamed rebellion and self-expression. Everywhere you went in the 1980s, there was at least one girl trying her hardest to be the next Madonna. They were in school hallways, shopping malls, and even church pews. It was not just an outfit, it was a personality. The influence of Madonna was so strong, people started copying her entire demeanor. The attitude, the strut, the way she tossed her hair. For a generation of young girls, Madonna was not just a pop star, she was the blueprint. But when you step back and look at it now, it was a bit much. Everyone looked like they had fallen into a costume bin at a thrift store. Layer upon layer, with no rhyme or reason. It was theatrical, over the top, and completely impractical. Yet it worked, somehow. For a moment in time, looking like a chaotic art project meant you were cutting edge. And while it makes us cringe now, we have to admit, those wannabes walked with the kind of confidence you just cannot fake. Rah-rah skirts were pure teenage energy stitched into fabric. They bounced, they twirled, and they made every high school hallway feel like a pep rally. Inspired by cheerleader uniforms, these layered skirts were all about movement and flair. And flair they had. Paired with oversized sweatshirts or crop tops, rah-rah skirts were the unofficial uniform of youth in the 1980s. But for all their cheer, they were also incredibly impractical. You could not sit down without adjusting them 10 different ways. A strong gust of wind turned them into a public embarrassment, and they were short, very short. Often layered with tulle or lace, they flirted with disaster on a daily basis. But that was the point, right? They were playful, rebellious, and just a little bit dangerous. Fashion magazines pushed them hard, pop stars wore them in music videos, and teenagers everywhere followed suit. Looking back, they feel like a fashion dare wrapped in bright colors. We wore them proudly, even though they made absolutely no sense. That was the 1980s for you. Style over sense, every single time. High-top fade haircuts were like sculpted monuments on top of your head. Precision, height, and geometry, that was the goal. This was not just a haircut. It was a form of self-expression, a symbol of pride, and a direct link to the rise of hip-hop culture. Popularized by legends like Kid from Kid and Play and Big Daddy Kane, the high-top fade was everywhere. And the taller it got, the better. Barbers became artists, using clippers like chisels to create angles sharper than your uncle's elbow at the dinner table. But with great style came great responsibility. Maintaining that height was not easy. You had to sleep a certain way, protect it from wind, rain, and any sudden movements, and let us not forget the peer pressure. If your fade was not sharp enough, you were not cutting it, literally. And if it was too sharp, well, now you were showing off. It was a delicate dance, a balancing act on top of your skull. And while some pulled it off flawlessly, others looked like they had a shoebox glued to their head. But even then, it was still cool, because confidence always beats conformity. Swatch watches were not about telling time. They were about telling the world you had style. The more you wore, the cooler you looked, or so we thought. One watch? Amateur hour? Two or more? Now we are talking. Swatch watches came in every color imaginable, with designs that ranged from sleek and minimal to full-on psychedelic chaos. They were candy for your wrists. Kids would trade them like baseball cards. Matching your watch to your outfit became a daily ritual. Some people even wore them up their arms like bracelets, stacking them high in a rainbow of plastic and ticking. But if we are being honest, it was overkill. These watches were loud, not just visually, but literally. Those plastic bands squeaked and snapped with every movement. And most of the time, they did not even tell the correct time. But that was never the point. It was all about the aesthetic, about proving you had the latest design, the rare colorway, the limited edition. Looking back, it feels like we confused accessories with identity. And maybe we did. But those colorful bands still hold a place in our collective memory, even if they are buried in a shoebox somewhere. New Coke was the marketing disaster of the decade, a soft drink saga so infamous it still gets brought up in business classes today. The 1980s were a time of bold moves, and Coca-Cola decided to make one of the boldest: change their classic formula. The result? Chaos. People were outraged. Protests broke out. Letters poured in. You would have thought the company had canceled Christmas. What Coca-Cola failed to understand was that their original recipe was more than a soda. It was a cultural icon, a flavor tied to childhood memories, family barbecues, and simple joys. Swapping it out for a sweeter, more modern taste felt like a betrayal. The backlash was so intense that Coca-Cola had to backpedal fast, reintroducing the original as Coca-Cola Classic. That phrase alone tells you everything you need to know about the mistake. New Coke was supposed to revolutionize the brand. Instead, it reminded everyone that messing with nostalgia is dangerous business. It is a perfect snapshot of the 1980s, ambitious, flashy, and a little too confident for its own good. The 1980s were home to one of the pettiest yet most defining tech showdowns of all time: Betamax versus VHS. On paper, Betamax was the clear winner. It had better picture quality, sound, and a sleeker design. But in the land of consumer habits, logic did not matter. What mattered was recording time, and VHS offered more of it. That tiny detail tipped the scale. Suddenly, a format war broke out in American living rooms, dragging families, video rental stores, and tech lovers into a full-blown turf war. Video rental shelves split down the middle, and choosing a format felt like choosing a side. If your family backed Betamax, you were labeled fancy but impractical. VHS users? They were the populist winners, the everyman's champion. Eventually, Betamax fell into obscurity, and VHS dominated the rest of the decade and beyond. But for those who invested in Betamax early, it felt like betrayal. The tapes, the players, the dreams, all outdated in a blink. Looking back, it was less about which was better and more about how fast America picked a winner and abandoned the other like a broken toy. And that lesson stuck. In the world of tech, being first or best never matters as much as being everywhere. Like, totally remember when everyone suddenly started sounding like they had just stepped out of a California mall? That was the Valley Girl effect. What started as a regional dialect quickly exploded into a full-on national identity crisis. Gag me with a spoon, as if, and for sure, were not just phrases, they were the soundtrack of an entire generation of teens. It all kicked off thanks to songs, television shows, and movies that painted the San Fernando Valley as this glittery, shallow wonderland of shopping and sarcasm. The moment the 1983 song Valley Girl by Frank and Moon Zappa hit the airwaves, it was over. Everyone wanted to talk like that. Even kids in places like Ohio and Nebraska were using phrases they barely understood. It was fashionable to sound clueless, to draw out your vowels and end every sentence with a question. Somehow, being detached and overly dramatic became chic. But underneath the giggles and gum smacks, there was a strange brilliance. Valley speak was performative. It was camp. It was satire disguised as slang. And while we cringe at it now, there was a reason it spread like wildfire. It was infectious, colorful, and unapologetically weird. It taught us all how to make boredom sound fabulous. There was a moment in the 1980s where teenagers decided that simply riding inside a car was not cool enough. Enter car surfing. Inspired by action movies and fueled by sheer recklessness, this dangerous stunt involved climbing on top of a moving vehicle and pretending you were riding a wave. It looked cool in the movies. In real life? Not so much. People were hurt. Some were killed. But for a brief, terrifying window of time, it was the ultimate dare. Kids would sneak out, climb onto their parents' sedans, and scream down suburban streets while their friends watched in awe or horror. No surfboard required, just a total disregard for safety and a friend with a heavy foot on the gas pedal. Car surfing became a rite of passage in some places, whispered about in school hallways like it was some underground challenge. The media, of course, did not help. Films like Teen Wolf glamorized it, treating it like a carefree thrill instead of a death wish. Eventually, reality caught up. Hospitals saw a spike in related injuries, and public service announcements started warning against it. But the damage was done. Car surfing was yet another reminder that in the 1980s, the line between fun and fatal was way too easy to miss. You have never seen chaos until you have seen grown adults wrestling over a doll. And not just any doll, a Cabbage Patch Kid. These round-faced, yarn-haired babies sparked one of the most absurd shopping frenzies in American history. Every parent wanted one. Every kid needed one. And stores? They were war zones. Introduced in the early 1980s, Cabbage Patch Kids came with their own names, adoption papers, and a bizarre origin story involving a magical cabbage patch. They were not cute in the traditional sense. Some were downright unsettling, but that did not matter. They were different, and different was gold. As demand exploded, supplies dwindled. What followed was pandemonium, fistfights in toy aisles, campouts outside stores, news crews filming lines of desperate parents begging for stock updates. It was like Black Friday got stuck in a loop. Eventually, the dolls became more than toys. They were cultural artifacts. Kids brought them everywhere. Parents bragged about snagging one. And the resale market? Wild. Looking back, it feels impossible that something so simple caused so much hysteria. But it happened. And it is the reason we now side-eye every must-have toy with a little more skepticism. In the 1980s, the food court was not just where you ate. It was where you lived. Malls became temples of teenage life, and the food court was the sacred center. Rows of neon-lit counters serving pizza, Chinese food, soft pretzels, and orange soda were surrounded by clusters of kids who had no interest in shopping. You were there to see and be seen. If you scored a booth, that was prime real estate. You could spot friend groups huddled over shared trays, swapping gossip, homework, and fries. Some were there for hours. It was noisy, chaotic, and always smelled like frying oil and sugar. But it was home. No smartphones, no social media, just human chaos in its purest form. You met crushes there. You made breakups worse there. You heard the best stories and the dumbest rumors in those sticky chairs. And every mall had its own cast of regulars. Looking back, it is wild how much emotional weight we placed on a glorified cafeteria. But in a decade obsessed with consumerism and image, the mall food court was the perfect playground. Cheap, flashy, and always full of life. Acid-washed denim was the uniform of rebellion and the poster child for fashion excess in the 1980s. It was loud, it was proud, and it was everywhere. Jackets, jeans, skirts, vests, no item of clothing was safe from that bleached, blotchy pattern. It looked like someone had dropped their pants in a chemical spill and called it style. But at the time, it was hot. Rockstar, hot. Brands leaned in hard, making sure everyone from 6th graders to pop icons looked like they had been through a denim apocalypse. The trend was so overpowering, entire outfits were built around a single pair of acid-washed jeans. Bonus points if you matched the jacket. The texture? Rigid. The look? Aggressive. And yet, it somehow captured the messy energy of the decade. You were not just wearing jeans, you were making a statement. A wild, possibly regretful statement. Looking back, it is hard to imagine why we all wanted to look like we had been attacked by bleach. But for one bizarre moment in fashion history, the more toxic your pants looked, the cooler you were. If you were a kid in the 1980s, your bedroom was not just a place to sleep. It was a shrine to whatever obsession had gripped your young mind that year. Transformers, strawberry shortcake, Garfield, neon jungle. Whatever it was, you did not stop at bedsheets. You got the wallpaper, the curtains, the rugs, the nightlight, and maybe even matching pajamas. It was total commitment, and it was overwhelming. Walk into any room and you were visually assaulted by one color scheme or cartoon character screaming from every surface. These rooms were less cozy retreat and more marketing campaign gone rogue. Parents fed into it too. Catalogs and department stores sold bundles promising themed dreams that ended up looking like fever dreams. And you were proud of it. You showed it off to your friends like it was an award. But today, it is like looking back on a candy-colored battlefield. Why were we okay with living inside a toy aisle? Probably because childhood in the 1980s was all about extremes. You did not just like something, you lived in it. Halogen lighting promised a sleek, modern glow. What it actually gave us was eye strain and overheated rooms. In the 1980s, these ultra-bright bulbs took over homes like a futuristic plague. Everyone was trying to move away from soft, yellow, incandescent lights. Halogen was the new hotness, literally. These things burned like mini suns. They got so hot you could cook an egg under one. But because they looked minimalist and Euro, homeowners loved them. Living rooms, bedrooms, offices, no space was safe. Suddenly, every lamp looked like it had been designed for a spaceship. But comfort? That went out the window. You could not relax under a halogen spotlight. It was like trying to unwind in a dentist's chair. And if one broke, good luck. They shattered like glass grenades. Still, for a while, halogen meant you had taste. And as was tradition in the 1980s, we sacrificed comfort on the altar of aesthetic. Few objects scream 1980s cool, quite like the transparent landline phone. You know the one. You could see all the colorful wires, chips, and circuits buzzing inside the plastic shell. It was like holding a piece of a robot's brain. And back then, that was the height of innovation. These phones were not any better than regular ones. They just looked cooler. You could slam them down after an angry call and still feel futuristic. Teenagers loved them because they were funky, a little rebellious, and different from the beige rotary phones still clinging to kitchen walls. Some even lit up when they rang. Every call felt like it came from outer space. But let us be real. They were all style, no substance. If one broke, good luck fixing it. The novelty wore off fast, but in the moment, owning a transparent phone was like owning the future. Looking back, it is a perfect snapshot of how the 1980s treated technology. If it glows, if it clicks, and if it looks cool, buy it. When music videos became the new Hollywood, the 1980s went absolutely wild. Bigger budgets, bigger hair, bigger explosions. Directors treated 3-minute songs like blockbuster movies. Storylines, optional, symbolism, overloaded. 1 minute you were watching a singer belt their heart out, the next they were battling robots in space or wandering through surreal dreamscapes. It was pure visual chaos, and we could not get enough. Artists like Michael Jackson and Madonna turned music videos into events. Every premiere was a moment. But for every thriller, there were 10 videos where the budget clearly outweighed the logic. Saxophones in deserts, shirtless men in fog, women spinning in slow motion for no reason. The goal was not to match the song. It was to make you watch. And it worked. Videos became more famous than the music. Looking back, it is impossible to tell where the artistry ended and the excess began. But that is what made them so unforgettable. They were flashy, bizarre, and overdone, and that was exactly the point. Jelly bracelets were the glittery plastic proof that too much of a good thing can get very, very weird. At first, they were innocent enough, colorful, stretchy, and fun to stack. But the 1980s never knew when to stop. Suddenly, kids were wearing 20, 30, even 50 of these things on one arm, turning their wrists into rubbery rainbows that squeaked with every movement. Each color supposedly meant something: friendship, love, luck. But no one really knew or agreed on what. Urban legends took over, with rumors flying around schoolyards that different colors had secret meanings, way too grown up for the actual age group wearing them. It went from playful accessory to whispered scandal in no time. Still, kids and teens collected them like candy. Some matched them to outfits. Others treated them like trophies from mall hauls or birthday party goodie bags. You could trade them, snap them, or just let them dangle and slap against your desk while you tried to focus in class. Teachers hated them. Parents rolled their eyes. But to the 1980s youth, jelly bracelets were wearable rebellion, and the more you had, the more popular you felt. Looking back, it is kind of wild how far we went with what was basically a glorified rubber band. But in a decade that was all about going big or going home, even our accessories had to make noise, literally and figuratively. The Rubiks Cube was not just a toy. It was a pop culture phenomenon disguised as a six-sided mental breakdown. Introduced in the late 1970s, it took off like a rocket in the 1980s, and suddenly it was everywhere. From classrooms and coffee tables to cartoons and cereal box promotions. Solving it became the ultimate flex. But let's be honest, most people never solved it. They peeled the stickers off, they gave it one twist and gave up. Yet owning one still made you feel smart, like you were on the edge of brilliance even if you never cracked it past two sides. The cube was like a status symbol, sitting there taunting you with its perfectly colored faces. Kids bragged about their times, and speed cubing contests popped up all over the place. But for many, it was more about the image than the actual solution. You would keep it on your desk like a trophy, untouched and unsolved, but still totally cool. Some people even used it as a fashion prop. You know, a cube keychain hanging from your belt loop. Solving it? Optional? Having one? Required. It became one of those rare things that made you feel smart just by association. The Rubiks Cube turned thinking into an aesthetic, and while the obsession faded a bit, its legacy never quite left. Even now, the sound of it twisting can snap you right back into a time when puzzles felt personal, and unsolved meant you were still trying. At least, that's what we told ourselves. Soap operas in the 1980s were not just dramatic. They were full-blown emotional marathons in shoulder pads and sequins. Shows like Dynasty and Falcon Crest pushed the limits of believability with plot lines that made Shakespeare look reserved. Amnesia, secret twins, stolen fortunes, surprise pregnancies — it was all there, wrapped in glossy production and orchestral theme songs. Every character was either scheming, crying, or throwing a drink in someone's face, and we watched it like it was gospel. Daytime television was the holy grail of drama, and primetime soaps took it up 10 more notches. These shows were appointment viewing. People structured their evenings around them. Fans discussed characters like they were neighbors. And the fashion? Just as outrageous. Big hair, glitzy dresses, and enough eyeliner to supply a department store. It was escapism at its finest, and tackiest. But somehow, all that excess made it perfect. These soap operas became cultural landmarks. Everyone knew who Alexis Carrington was. You did not have to watch to know. They filtered into talk shows, late-night jokes, even Halloween costumes. Looking back, it all seems like a fever dream, a beautiful, melodramatic fever dream. But for a generation dealing with real-world struggles, these over-the-top tales of betrayal and glamour were a strangely comforting mess. They were messy, they were ridiculous, and we absolutely loved them. Pastels in the 1980s were not soft or subtle. They were everywhere, like a cotton candy factory exploded onto the fashion world. Inspired heavily by shows like Miami Vice, pale pinks, baby blues, soft yellows, and mint greens dominated closets across the country. Suits, dresses, shoes, even socks. Everyone looked like they were on their way to an Easter brunch, whether it was July or December. And for some reason, we thought it made us look cool, maybe even exotic. The pastel suit became a cultural staple, often paired with a white t-shirt and loafers with no socks. It was chill sophistication, or so we were told, but mostly it just looked like someone gave formal wear a scoop of sherbet. These outfits were flashy but not fierce, loud but not bold. They were oddly neutral and aggressive at the same time. And it did not stop with suits. Workout clothes, school outfits, and even prom dresses came in a dizzying range of soft tones. When everyone dressed like the inside of a baby shower, it became hard to tell the difference between fashion-forward and full-blown delusion. But that was the magic of the 1980s. If it was weird and colorful, it was in. Now, those pastel photos live forever, haunting us in family albums and old yearbooks. A reminder that there is a fine line between trend-setting and trend-regretting. If you grew up in the 1980s, chances are your memories smell like bubblegum, fake strawberries, and artificial pine. That is because the decade was soaked, absolutely drenched, in scented everything. Scratch and sniff stickers were just the beginning. We had strawberry-scented dolls, grape-scented markers, bubblegum lip gloss, and shampoo that made your head smell like a fruit salad. It did not stop at products for kids either. Adults had their own arsenal of aggressively perfumed lotions, hairsprays, and deodorants that could knock you out in an elevator. There was no such thing as a hint of fragrance. Everything was a full frontal assault on the nose. Enter a classroom? It smelled like a candy store. Walk through the mall? You passed through clouds of vanilla musk and peach body spray thick enough to trip on. Even stationery came with scent baked in. We were basically living inside a scented candle store without knowing it. And at the time, we loved it. More scent meant more fun, more personality, more something. But now, just a whiff of synthetic strawberry can transport you straight back to gym class lockers and glittery notebooks. It is funny how something as simple as a smell can hold so much nostalgia and regret. The 1980s taught us a lot about overdoing it. And nothing proves that more than our unrelenting obsession with making everything smell fun. Sunbathing with baby oil and reflectors was the ultimate summer ritual. You lay out in the backyard, on the roof, or at the beach, armed with nothing but a bottle of Johnson's baby oil and a silver reflector under your chin. The goal? Tan fast, tan deep, and tan dark. The shine from the oil made your skin sizzle, and the reflector bounced rays straight into your face like a heat lamp. Everyone did it. Magazines encouraged it. Tan lines were a badge of honor, peeling skin a minor inconvenience. Sunscreen, if it was used at all, was barely SPF 4. People believed a good tan was healthy. Doctors warned of sunburn, but nobody listened. Today, dermatologists beg patients to stop tanning, and laws limit tanning bed access for minors. The link between ultraviolet exposure and skin cancer is undeniable. But back then, summer meant bronze skin and beach bodies, no matter the cost. Sunburns turned into tans, blisters were shrugged off, and if the oil left you red and raw, you did it again the next day. The danger came slowly. Just like another invisible risk, many families kept right next to the medicine cabinet, in a tiny glass stick filled with mercury. JellO molds were not just recipes, they were performances. In the 1950s and 1960s, these shimmering towers of gelatin were the pride of dinner tables and potlucks alike. Suspended inside were slices of fruit, vegetables, nuts, and sometimes even meats, frozen in mid-dance by the wobble of lemon or lime gelatin. The molds themselves were often metal, shaped like flowers, domes, or decorative rings. Housewives practiced their releases with reverence, praying the mold would slide out cleanly with a satisfying thwack. The result? A glossy, surreal centerpiece. Guests gasped, children poked. Recipes were passed from neighbor to neighbor, each claiming their version was best. But these creations were not just about looks. JellO was cheap, shelf-stable, and forgiving. It let families stretch their ingredients during lean times. It made leftovers glamorous, and it brought a little joy to a time when people needed something bright and strange and wonderful. Eventually, tastes changed. Molds disappeared into cabinets. JellO became a snack cup. But for decades, it was art, it was pride, and it was love in a ring-shaped dish. When did we stop celebrating the food that made us smile before it ever touched our lips? Tile countertops used to be the envy of every stylish post-war kitchen. Bright turquoise, sunny yellow, or soft pink ceramic tiles lined the counters like a checkerboard of domestic optimism. But the secret every home cook knew was this: those grout lines were a menace. They absorbed spills, caught crumbs, and stained faster than you could scrub. You might as well have been cooking on a tiled floor. Still, people loved the look. It felt cheerful, polished, and clean, at least at first glance. The tiles were cool to the touch and easy to replace if one chipped. You wiped them down after every meal, but somehow they still told the story of every spill and every stir. Those stains were not just grime, they were memories set in stone. But no matter how often you scrubbed with baking soda and vinegar, the grout lines always seemed a shade darker than the day before. Eventually, the shine wore off. Laminate, granite, and seamless solid surfaces took over. You could wipe once and be done. No more grout brushes, no more bleach, but something about those tile counters still lingers in the memory. They were imperfect, yes, but also warm and lived in. Kitchens where birthday cakes were frosted and Sunday gravy simmered for hours. When did spotless surfaces become more important than stories? No seatbelt use was not just common, it was practically invisible. Cars came with seatbelts, but they were rarely used. Children piled into the back seat without a second thought, curling up with pillows, playing games, or hanging their heads out the window like golden retrievers. On long trips, siblings would wrestle or lie down to nap across the entire back row. Adults, too, often left their belts untouched, especially in the front passenger seat. The seatbelt light was just an annoying feature, easily ignored. There were no alarms, no relentless dings, just silence and freedom. Many people viewed seatbelts as unnecessary unless they were driving fast or on highways. Some even believed they were more dangerous during crashes. It was not until the late 1980s and early 1990s that states began to enforce seatbelt laws. Today, it is a non-negotiable. Not buckling up can cost you money, your license, or your child's safety. But back then, you were more likely to get in trouble for forgetting to bring home milk than for not wearing a belt. And if the roads were that casual, imagine how carefree kids were on their bikes, zooming through neighborhoods without a helmet in sight. The Philco Predicta television looked like it belonged in a spaceship, not a living room. Its bold design, featuring a separate swivel screen perched atop a futuristic base, turned heads the moment it arrived in 1958. This was not just a television. This was the future. The Predicta came in a range of pastel colors, with names like Holiday and Pedestal. It was slim, sleek, and shockingly modern in a time when televisions still looked like wooden trunks. For the first time, you could turn the screen without moving the entire cabinet. It was clever, it was playful, it made you feel like tomorrow had already arrived. But the beauty came at a price. Technicians hated servicing it. Components wore out quickly. Still, families loved it. They gathered around it, cross-legged on shag rugs, watching black and white broadcasts with wide eyes. It made television magical. Not background noise, not distraction. Magic. But magic is fragile. And soon, newer sets with fewer quirks replaced it. The Predicta faded into memory, too strange for the mainstream, too delicate for time. Now it lives in vintage stores and collectors' basements, quietly glowing with nostalgia. How did the most visionary television of its era become a footnote in history? Warming drawers used to be the quiet hero of the kitchen, especially when dinner was not ready all at once. Tucked just below the oven, this thin, shallow drawer kept plates warm so that food would not go cold before it reached the table. You would set it to low, slide in your dishes, and when the roast came out, everything was ready to serve piping hot. This feature was a nod to formality. Meals meant something, and every detail mattered. Back then, no one wanted to pile roast beef onto a cold plate. But as life sped up and microwaves took over, warming drawers started disappearing. They took up space. They were easy to forget about. And soon, they felt like a relic of a more elegant time. Builders stopped including them in standard models, and even higher-end kitchens started to phase them out. Now, if you see one, it is usually mistaken for a storage drawer. But once, it meant warmth, literally and figuratively. It meant taking care, not just serving food. When did we stop setting the table like it was worth it? She was always there, watching over the bathroom like a guardian of dignity and decorum. A porcelain head, maybe with painted lashes and a tiny smile peeking out from the top of a wide crocheted dress. Underneath that ruffled skirt, an emergency roll of toilet paper, hidden in plain sight. These toilet paper dolls were a hallmark of mid-century bathrooms, especially in homes with a certain flair for tradition. You did not just keep spare rolls visible, you dressed them up. Sometimes they were handmade with love, sometimes bought from a local craft fair, and sometimes they came from catalog orders with matching sets. They were oddly formal, oddly whimsical, and completely accepted. But as homes became more modern and bathroom designs leaned toward minimalism, these quirky guardians began to disappear. People wanted sleek lines, not frilly surprises. The dolls were packed away, given away, or just forgotten. Today, you might stumble across one in a secondhand shop, her skirt a little dusty, her smile unchanged. And in that moment, you remember a different kind of bathroom, one that was personal, playful, and just a little bit strange. Because once upon a time, hiding your toilet paper was not about shame. It was about style. Letting kids ride standing up in the back seat was not just overlooked. It was often encouraged. The space between the two front seats was a coveted spot, a mini stage where children stood to give directions, tell stories, or just feel taller. It felt like driving without actually driving. Parents drove with one arm loosely draped over the passenger seat while a child stood between them, gripping the dashboard, peering out at the road like a co-pilot. In the back, kids slid across vinyl seats, bounced with each turn, or lay down and stared at the ceiling. There were no reminders to buckle up, because buckling up was not yet a rule. It was a nuisance. The seatbelt often stayed buried beneath the cushions or was jammed into the crack between the seats. Today, it is illegal for a child to ride without a proper car seat or restraint. Parents now face fines, or worse, for what was once everyday family travel. But back then, riding unrestrained was just another way to feel free. There was trust, or maybe just oblivion. Either way, it was the norm. And if today's laws would call that reckless, the next parenting habit would cause even more of an uproar. It took place in plain sight, often with a crowd watching. The O'Keefe and Merritt Aristocrat range was not just a stove, it was a throne. Towering over every other appliance in the room, this 734-pound marvel was the ultimate status symbol in post-war kitchens. It did not whisper innovation, it shouted it. With twin ovens, broilers, warming drawers, and a built-in timer clock, it looked like something from a science fiction movie, only real. Housewives of the 1940s and 1950s dreamed of owning one. Advertisements called it the Cadillac of kitchen ranges, and they were not exaggerating. You could roast a turkey, bake a pie, broil steaks, and warm dinner rolls at the same time. It was massive, yes, but that size came with function. Wide enamel cooktops offered space for every pot and pan. The dials were thick, confident, and satisfying to turn. It felt like driving a classic car, slow, powerful, and designed to last forever. But time moves fast, kitchens shrank, stainless steel arrived, and the aristocrat, once a dream, became too heavy, too large, too old-fashioned. Most were discarded during remodels, sold for scrap or left in garages like relics from a forgotten empire. But ask anyone who grew up with one, and they will tell you that stove made cooking feel like a ceremony. When did we decide that smaller meant better? Before open concept became the norm, the kitchen pass-through window was the perfect compromise. It was a small rectangular opening in the wall, usually with a sliding panel or shutters, that connected the kitchen to the dining room. You could serve dishes straight through, peek out to check on guests, or whisper a message without leaving your post at the stove. It was functional and a little bit fun, like a drive-through for your own home. Kids loved it because it felt like a secret door. Adults loved it because it saved steps. These pass-throughs became iconic in mid-century ranch homes and suburban houses. But as walls came down and kitchens turned into wide-open living spaces, the humble pass-through lost its purpose. Some were plastered over during remodels. Others became awkward holes in drywall with no clear use. But once, they made kitchens feel like command centers, like you could be in two rooms at once. What did we gain when we knocked down those walls? And what subtle joys did we lose? They looked like nothing. A tiny slit in the back of the medicine cabinet, sometimes labeled, sometimes not. But mid-century homeowners knew exactly what it was for. Used razor blades. Back when razors were made of metal and designed to be replaced regularly, you could not toss them in the trash without risking someone's fingers. So you dropped them into the wall instead, one by one, forever. Builders thought they were doing something smart, safe disposal with no mess. But over time, those tiny drops added up. Home renovators have opened walls and found literal piles of old blades resting silently between the studs, untouched for 50 years. Today, the idea seems insane. But it was once standard practice. The slot was clean, tidy, out of sight. It solved a problem without really thinking about the future. And now, those future walls are filled with yesterday's solutions. The blade slot reminds us that even the safest-seeming features can have a hidden cost. That behind every smooth bathroom wall, there might be a quiet collection of rusting metal, forgotten by everyone except the house itself. Lack of booster seats was not an oversight. It was the norm. Children too small for seatbelts simply sat on their knees or curled up cross-legged on the back seat. If you were lucky, you sat on a pillow to see out the window. That was your booster. Parents barely considered height or weight guidelines because there were none to follow. Babies sometimes rode in laps. Toddlers were belted in with adult straps that did little to protect them. Car seat laws were either non-existent or loosely enforced. In many families, a car seat was a hand-me-down with no instructions. Booster seats were rare, and safety testing even rarer. You might remember the seatbelt cutting into your neck or slipping off your shoulder entirely. Nobody measured, nobody adjusted. It was all instinct. But as crash statistics mounted and tragic accidents made headlines, laws slowly changed. By the late 1990s, most states required booster seats for children under a certain age or height. Today, it is unthinkable to drive without one. But for those raised in the back seats of station wagons and minivans, survival often came down to luck. And while cars were full of risks, the real danger sometimes came from inside the home, especially when people handled deadly materials without ever knowing it. The cookie press was a piece of holiday magic that turned dough into art with nothing but a squeeze. With its interchangeable metal discs and ratchet-style handle, it could create dozens of perfect cookies in seconds, each one shaped like a flower, star, or tree. It was especially popular during the holiday season, when kitchens smelled of cinnamon and vanilla, and the radio played old Christmas tunes. The press made baking feel like a celebration. Kids would fight over who got to press the dough, and every batch felt like a tiny miracle. No rolling pin, no cookie cutter. Just one graceful push, and a perfect cookie appeared. The dough was usually soft and buttery, flavored with almond or lemon, and finished with a dusting of sugar or colored sprinkles. The cookie press was about more than efficiency. It was about beauty. It said your cookies could be delicious and delightful, but as store-bought cookies became more common and as baking turned into a rare weekend chore instead of a family tradition, the press went quiet. It sits in the backs of drawers now, its discs scattered and forgotten. But for those who remember, it was a joy machine. When did we stop making food that felt like play? Imagine opening your cabinet to plan dinner and seeing a chalkboard right on the inside of the door. Some even had pull-down recipe scrolls made of parchment or linen, mounted like an old-fashioned map. You could write a grocery list, the day's menu, or a reminder that your mother-in-law was coming over. These weren't just novelty features. They were part of how a kitchen thought out loud. In a time before smartphones or sticky notes, these were the planners, the notepads, the command centers of the kitchen, and they told a story. In chalk dust and grease smudges, you could see a family's week unfold. Sometimes the writing faded, but the memory of it never did. It was handwriting that knew your routines better than you did. Eventually, they faded out. Whiteboards came in, then apps, then voice memos. Cupboards no longer had messages waiting. Now, kitchens are silent and glossy, all smooth wood and cold steel. No one scribbles meatloaf tonight inside a drawer anymore. The charm is gone, and so is the handwriting. But in old kitchens, those chalk smears still whisper what once was. When did we stop writing things down where it mattered most? There was a time when people smoked everywhere, in the car, at the dinner table, even in the bathroom. That is why so many mid-century homes had small ceramic ashtrays built right into the bathroom wall, usually next to the toilet or above the sink. They matched the tile, often set in pastel pink, mint, or baby blue, and they were not there by accident. The bathroom was one of the last quiet places in the house, and for many adults, it was a place to take a moment and take a puff. These ashtrays were permanent, glazed into the wall, designed to last. But as the health risks of smoking became impossible to ignore, these features quickly became awkward reminders of another time. People stopped using them. Some covered them with art. Others chipped them out entirely. Renovations wiped them away, but they left behind a story. A time when cigarettes were so common, even the bathroom made room for them. If you find one still in place today, it often draws a double take. Not because it is shocking, but because it is so easy to forget how normal it once was. The ashtray says nothing, but it remembers everything. Parents spanking kids in public did not invite whispers or legal warnings. It earned nods of approval. In the 1980s, discipline happened wherever it was needed. At the grocery store, in parking lots, outside churches, in schoolyards. If a child misbehaved, parents corrected them on the spot. A quick swat to the backside or a firm grip on the arm was considered loving firmness, not abuse. Older folks would even say, "That child will thank you one day." The phrase, "spare the rod, spoil the child," was not just quoted, it was lived. Nobody called the authorities. Teachers spanked students too. It was woven into the culture of consequences and correction. Today, that same act is considered public violence by many. It can lead to police reports, social worker visits, or even legal charges. And yet, for many who grew up back then, it was the way boundaries were taught. A smack on the bottom followed by a stern look was how parents said, "I love you enough to correct you." Right or wrong, it was real. But for a generation that was spanked in the cereal aisle, there was another truth. Most of them never buckled up in the car ride home. The electric egg poacher was the quiet champion of a better breakfast. Small, unassuming, and often overlooked, it sat tucked away in the corners of countertops, promising soft whites and warm yolks without a pot or pan in sight. You filled the base with water, cracked your eggs into the holders, and watched the steam rise slowly into a gentle cloud. It was perfect for those who wanted elegance without the effort. No vinegar, no swirling water, no chance of a ruined yolk. Just press the button and walk away. In a world full of toasters and coffee makers, it whispered, "Take your time." It belonged to the kind of home that played soft jazz on Sunday mornings and served breakfast on ceramic plates instead of paper towels. The poacher did not need to be flashy. It was consistent. It gave people back their mornings. And yet, it faded. Because poached eggs stopped being everyday meals. Because we forgot how nice it was to feel fancy before 9 in the morning. Now, most sit in thrift shops, unused and unappreciated. But for those who remember, one bite of that perfectly poached egg takes them straight back. When did we decide breakfast was no longer worth slowing down for? Behind the smooth cabinet doors of many mid-century kitchens hid a surprising tool, a pull-out dish drainer that lived inside the wall. After washing dishes, you would slide out the rack, load it up, and let everything drip dry behind closed doors. It kept counters clear, made the kitchen look tidy, and gave a sense of order that matched the rest of the house. Some even had small trays underneath to catch the water. It was not about hiding the mess. It was about making space feel peaceful. When plastic racks and countertop drainers became standard, these hidden drying systems quietly disappeared. New kitchens no longer had room for them, and they were hard to clean and prone to mold. But there was something thoughtful about them, something neat, something kind of charming. Now, we just pile dishes in the sink or leave them out for hours. The idea of drying dishes out of sight feels like something from a different era, one where appearances mattered, but so did small comforts. What else have we stopped tucking away for the sake of convenience? Imagine soaking in the tub after a long day, only to hear your mother's voice echo through the wall. Dinner's ready. In mid-century homes, this was not a dream, it was reality. Bathroom intercoms were part of built-in home systems that connected every room with wired communication. You could buzz the kitchen from the basement, call the front door from the master bedroom, and yes, even talk from the bathroom. It felt futuristic, like living inside a spaceship, but the novelty wore off. The sound quality was rough, privacy was gone, and nothing killed a relaxing bath faster than your dad asking where the remote was, through a speaker. By the 1980s, intercom systems were seen as clunky and outdated. They stopped working, they were never repaired, and eventually, they were just decorative panels collecting dust. Some people pulled them out entirely. Others left them in the wall like little relics of forgotten innovation. Today, they sit frozen, buttons unpressed, speakers silent. They are a reminder that once, even the bathroom was part of the conversation, whether you wanted it to be or not. DIY asbestos home repairs were once a weekend project, not a professional hazard. In the 1980s, homeowners took pride in doing it themselves, scraping tiles, pulling down insulation, cutting through old cement boards with their bare hands and maybe a dust mask, if that. Asbestos was everywhere, in popcorn ceilings, vinyl floor tiles, wall insulation, pipe wrap. It was cheap, durable, and deadly, though few knew how deadly. People inhaled fibers while remodeling bathrooms, sanding attic walls, or tearing out old basements. There were no warning stickers, no hazmat suits. You might remember helping your parents renovate, the air cloudy with dust and the room echoing with the sound of tools. What you could not see were the microscopic particles entering your lungs. Decades later, asbestos exposure was linked to serious illnesses like mesothelioma and lung cancer. Today, it is illegal in many building materials, and removal requires certified professionals and safety protocols. But back then, it was just part of fixing up the house. The risks were invisible, the consequences delayed. And as much as the air inside homes was quietly dangerous, people also put themselves at risk under the sun, slathered in baby oil and chasing the perfect tan. The chamber stove did something no modern appliance dares attempt. It kept cooking after you turned it off. That was not a gimmick. That was engineering genius wrapped in cast iron and chrome. Born in the early 20th century, the chamber stove became a quiet sensation in post-war homes for one incredible reason. It cooked with the gas turned off. Thanks to thick insulation and a sealed oven chamber, you could roast an entire chicken, switch off the flame halfway, and let retained heat do the rest. It was efficient, elegant, and oddly futuristic. And while it lacked a touchscreen or a clock, it came with something more valuable: trust. People swore by it. Some still do. The stove's signature thermowell let you slow-cook soups and stews deep inside a lidded metal pit while you handled the rest of your day. The burners had griddles built right in, and the oven door sealed tighter than a vault. It made people feel clever, like they were cooking smarter, not harder. But in the rush for newer, faster, shinier appliances, the Chambers was quietly pushed aside. Too heavy, too bulky, too slow. Or so we thought. Why did we stop believing that doing more with less was the smartest design of all? The electric hot plate built into the countertop was not meant to replace the stove. It was there for the in-between moments, the simmering, the reheating, the lonely cup of soup on a gray afternoon. It looked like a single stovetop coil embedded right into the counter, usually near the sink or beside the coffee station. You turned the knob and it glowed red. No pots stacked on burners, no full stove required. For single servings or quick boils, it was perfect. They became especially popular in the 1950s and 1960s during the height of the modern kitchen boom. They were sleek, functional, and felt futuristic. But they came with risks. Open coils got hot fast, stayed hot longer, and were sometimes forgotten. Over time, homeowners chose to have more counter space instead. The coils vanished, replaced with cutting boards and clean surfaces. But those hot plates once stood for independence, the idea that a small meal still mattered, that a house could be big, but one burner could still feel like home. What part of the kitchen did we lose when we made everything smooth? If this took you back, hit like, drop your cringiest 80s memory in the comments, and subscribe for more retro chaos.